Hello and welcome to the first episode of 2025, our New Year's episode. Today we're going to be looking back at our predictions from this time last year, where we predicted what was going to happen in 2024, while also making some predictions for the 2025 upcoming year. So let's get right into it. Hello there.
Hello, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's good to be back.
It is good to be back. First podcast after the live podcast.
And back in our natural habitat.
Back in our natural habitat.
Feels like a while since we've been here, actually.
Yes. Although I'm sure there'll be new arenas soon.
Yeah, definitely. We've had a few in the last few episodes, haven't we?
We have. So, 2024,
Yep.
January, we looked at what we thought was going to be coming through and made some predictions.
Yep.
Should we have a chat about those and the reality of those and then look at 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big year, 2024, for the industry.
It is. It was.
And for ourselves. It's been good.
It has been very good. Lots of growth, which has been good.
Yeah.
We saw at the end of 2023, we saw the digital maturity both in the consumers and in market hit a peak.
Yep.
Which is why, as we go through some of these predictions that we made in 2024, we saw an acceleration of delivery of technology. Yeah, absolutely. The question is, did they get the adoption? But let's dig into it.
Cool. Great. Let's have a look at the predictions then. Firstly, we had rapid AI disruption.
Yeah.
We predicted, and I think I predicted actually, that AI would continue to accelerate at an unprecedented pace. I mean, it'd take a rocket science to guess that might happen, right? Overtaking the adoption speed of earlier transformative technologies like mobile. We talked about that a lot over the last year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Then generative AI would become widespread, potentially offering mortgage or property advice as effectively as, or perhaps even more effectively than human advisors.
So the realities of that, there has been a rapid advancement in AI.
Absolutely.
In the industry. I think there's been certain pockets of that advancement. So if you look across the sort of actors in the ecosystem, the main areas that we've seen advancements has been in the lending space and some of the more advanced conveyancers who are actually looking at AI. I think for me, there's been fantastic growth in the development of capability. But in terms of the application of those capabilities into live environments, that's not been as quick as I would have anticipated. But I think we're going to see that the application of it really starts to come to the.
Well, I agree 100%. I think our market traditionally is slightly more cautious than others, shall we say?
Yeah.
And therefore by direction, slightly slower to adopt new technologies, especially in the application of them. There's often lots of testing, but the applications being deployed into the live space, slightly slower. Now we have start to see those coming through, and what we know working with a lot of our clients is there's lots and lots of things going in the background at the moment.
Yeah.
When it came to the prediction around advice and mortgage and property advice into the marketplace, that's not necessarily coming to fruition on a mass scale. It is there. Yeah. It's not definitely absolutely a mass scale.
But this is the point about live environments, isn't it? We know that there's a lot of stuff happening in the background.
Yeah, and actually starting to support advisors in their day-to-day work is becoming a real live application that is actually bearing huge fruits at the moment. So we're sort of 50-50 on that one. Yeah, kind of bang on, but also not quite as advanced as we perhaps hoped. And I think when I made this prediction, I said I'd like to see it get there, and I'd still like to see it get there. I stood on stage at the back end of last year quite a few times and said that we should always and probably will always have humans in the loop when it comes to advising, and I still tend to agree on that and still definitely agree on that. The technology from an AI standpoint is getting to the stage and will get to the stage in 2025, because we can see it coming already in the announcements from CES this week. Definitely fueling that. The technology is going to be even more powerful than we ever thought it possibly could be, probably in this calendar year. Emergence of new AI-driven players. And I remember talking about this and thinking about this, and it's always been something that's been on the fore of my mind throughout the year, actually, is that some of the startups and challenger banks, Monzo, Revolut, Starlings of the world, perhaps might enter and expand into the mortgage and lending spaces. where large incumbents struggle with internal debates and legacy processes, small and nimble firms could therefore take advantage and enter and come into the market. Well, that's not happened, has it?
No.
Do you think it will?
I think, if I remember rightly, we said last year, that's not something that will happen in 2024. But I think what the prediction was is that the process for them possibly getting closer to getting into this sector will start. And that was true because obviously one of them was awarded a banking license, which will be the start. Now, I think they're a few years off probably getting it anywhere near getting into sort of mortgage lending. But the reality is that, they don't necessarily have to be a lender. How else can they come into this space? And I think as more horizontal digital integration that enables the interoperability in this market gets adopted and more people have an HDI strategy, the challengers will look to see how they can leverage the distribution of the incumbent areas that are in there and say, well, what role can we play in this? That could be an advisory piece. It could be but can we be a broker towards this? There's lots of things there. So no prediction for me on that, but just in terms of, is there emergence of new AI driven players? Yeah, there is, not necessarily from a lending standpoint, but
yeah. And actually,
there's definitely emergence of new AI driven players in this market. I was having a conversation with one of them yesterday. Pre-Christmas, I was having a conversation with a firm that's, doing very, very well. They've got a good product in market. They're making good revenue with it, and they're going for their sort of second round of funding. And that round of funding really will accelerate something for them. And that is it's disruptive. It's disruptive in the search market. It's kind of like, there is definitely an emergence of new AI driven players that are coming in. And I think that's definitely one that'll grow this year.
Yeah.
And actually be quite disruptive to incumbents if they're not kind of switched on to their AI and have like an AI practice that's kind of, assessing these sorts of things.
Yeah. It's the age old thing, right? They've got all the advantage in the world, but if they don't capitalise on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. The next one is focus on collaboration. And we said that true cross-functional collaboration will become more important across lenders, law firms, brokers and technology providers, shared initiatives and horizontal partnerships, synchronization projects we talked about, would help accelerate adoption of new technologies. Well, interesting, given we may have had a bit of foresight into some of this.
Yeah, look, I mean, this one definitely has happened. Yeah. I think the phrase collaboration was used so much last year. And in fairness, it was actually acted upon. Whenever you go to these different events, you can see people talking about it. But actually, we've seen in market true collaborations coming together of players. Actually, whether it's LMS running their pilot that they did last year, which is ongoing, and the stuff that they're doing. There's other players in market that are doing that. At the BSA, we saw that there were, collaborations between, lenders and origination providers looking at how they can do things, and the origination providers looking left and right of where they are to see, well, how do we enable interoperability? Because, if we leverage horizontal digital integration or HDI, we can leverage that interoperability. That interoperability delivers predictability. All of that is happening. That is going to massively happen at pace now, I think. And as we look across the market and we see from our own strategic advisory practice, that is a key enabler, I think is what I would say. So the focus on collaboration definitely happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Continued investment in infrastructure. So despite a potential tougher economic climate, definitely had that. The lending side of the ecosystem would keep investing in technology and infrastructure. Law firms might proceed more cautiously, focusing on margin protection before heavier investment returns.
I think if we look at the lender segment of that, we've definitely seen, that continued investment.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've been involved in some of that, and we've seen that continue. That definitely came true. I think in the conveyancing arena, I think from my vantage point, obviously we don't touch lots of conveyancers, but from from our own analysis of the market and from our own sort of research insights that we do, and obviously we look at and present information back to certain clients on, you can kind of break that market down into kind of three groups. At the top tier end, there was significant investment.
Yeah, there was.
And we obviously saw that because, we played a part in some of it. In the mid-tier, and I would say that these were firms that had got their own IT departments, but didn't necessarily have a C-suite that had a CTO in it, for example, but they'd got a level of IT in the organisation with elements of outsourcing. And then you've got the third group, which are just, pure outsource. I think in those two groups, we saw that as well, because our own research suggests that the amount of adoption of technology actually was significant.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
What's happened, though, is that the vendors that are delivering that tech have done great in the vertical for which they sit, but what they've lacked is the visibility of future, i.e. how does my application actually enable this conveyancer to view something left or right with me? So now what we've got is a three-tier almost grouping where, from a vendor standpoint, where you've got your application providers, then you've got your tier 3, then you've got your tier 2 providers, which are, we label as aggregators. They're kind of one step removed. They're interoperable one step either side of wherever their application sits in the ecosystem. And then obviously you've got your network providers, which are now coming to the fore. So I think from that kind of continued investment in infrastructure across the board, there's been significant investment in it. Yeah. Lender, conveyancer, so we just talked about that in those three groups. But actually, if we look further up the process or value stream, towards sort of settlement and lodgement, there's still continued investment happening there. There's new things going on there with RLN and other bits and pieces. And you come all the way down to the front with the advancement of the work that the OPDA have been doing around data standards. That's been, there's investment, not just from a monetary standpoint, but in time,
focus, standards.
Exactly. And you go back to that collaboration point. In fact, the OPDA is probably a really good one. So you can see a bunch of people all collaborating around getting standards in there. Then what we've got is the data bill, which is coming in. So all of this is kind of fundamentally advancing things in this market. And I think that, 2024 saw some really great strides of foundational effort to kind of get things going.
No, I agree 100%. Great. The next one, we had the movement towards faster home buying and remortgaging. So industry discussions increasingly highlight remortgaging a day, sale and purchase within a week as aspirational targets. More sophisticated processes and better data synchronization could bring these ambitions closer to reality, was what we said.
And I think that's happened. We've seen it. So, yeah. You just have to look at OPDA data standards.
Yes, just covered it.
LMS, National Property Transaction Network, work that they're doing, they've cleared, all of that is links to all of the things that we were talking about, and that's most definitely happened. Now, in terms of, a remortgage in a day actually does, there's probably the odd one that does happen.
Yeah.
Is there a sale and purchase in a week? Probably not. Well, definitely not.
Definitely.
But it's the advancements towards it, and I think that's what that prediction was all about, is that the industry is going to highlight it more. It's going to start to look at it more. And in truth, I think what we've seen has been a brave, bold steps.
Yeah.
Because this industry, and I'll be very candid about it, and people can shoot me down if they want, but there's been a lot of hot air for quite a number of years. And I think what we've seen is that there's a lot of, therefore, transformation fatigue. And we talk about this behind closed doors with clients when we do the readiness assessments and kind of looking at what it is for their product strategy and how they kind of start to develop that to move it forward. If you're going to go to market with something, remember that you can't just talk about it. You've actually got to deliver something, and that needs to come as a bit quickly. So don't start talking about things if there's not really much there, because people will get frustrated with that and it creates fatigue. So, and we've seen a lot of that, and I think what we saw last year was actually stuff starting to come to fruition.
Agreed. Number 6 was the importance of organisational readiness. So firms should lean into small POCs, proof of concepts, trials and rapid pilots rather than lengthy large-scale projects. strategy, culture, and talent orchestration. Can't say that word.
Orchestration.
Talent orchestration. I still can't say it. Must all align. A brilliant strategic plan can be hindered by poor culture or the wrong skills metrics.
Well, if you think where our business saw most of its growth last year, our business saw most of its growth in helping organisations develop that readiness, get the strategy in place, understand the lay of the land, where's the market been, where is it now, what does the future look like, and delivering them the pathways to go and implement that and prevent
the pilots and the tests,
the testing and everything else. And we saw that on,
every client, actually.
Every client and a multitude of accounts. And that really is, our business grew out of the back of that, because that's happened and we could see it happening. And I think if we look at our own journey, 3-4 years ago, when we kind of started out with this, we knew that the industry wasn't fully ready for all of the stuff that we could do, but we knew there was a handful of people that were ready now. And last year we saw it. And again, we'll see it 25, 26 and 27. The race is on.
Massively on.
And so, that organisational readiness, you've got, again, I can probably split it into 3 groups rather than 2. Ones that are really ready, they're already going. Ones that are starting to get all the foundations in place so that they can build upon it and go. We can see that with a lot of the lenders, actually, because they can see that. And then the final group, which is the ones that are they're a bit behind. And the truth is that they're the ones that, now need to start pushing. I think that's a good message, actually, as we look at as we move towards the 2025 predictions. Do not underestimate the damage of compounded debt. So what I mean by that is, I don't just mean technical debt from a techie standpoint. What I mean is that strategically, as a business owner, a business leader in this industry sector, if you are hesitant and you are slow in making decisions around technology practices, essentially it's like compounded interest, but it's compounded debt. And the longer that you leave things means that you are creating more and more of a problem that you won't see today. So if you and I ate 4 Mars bars every day, after a month, we might not see a huge impact, but certainly after 6 months, things would look a bit bad.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So, and it's the same with this. And I don't think all leaders see it. And, I think that's really important. It's sort of like, they're just kind of sat on the sidelines waiting to see what happens. It's like, this will happen to you. So it's really important as you kind of look at that organisational readiness, make the moves now.
Yeah. Talent and recruitment shifts. So recruitment for certain talents, we said would be big in 2024. AI, ML, and specialised products engineering skills would become more challenging under the traditional hiring model. A consultative approach aligning existing teams with new expert hires or partnerships would emerge as a critical success factor. Now, I think personally, this has been one of the biggest changes we've seen, especially with the people that we're working with, is the shift towards particular talent roles. And then we say it all the time, right, that organisations are digital, they're technology first organisations now that just happen to offer a service in whatever that might be. It could be lending, could be conveyancing, could be whatever it might be, right? But we have seen especially in the last 6 months of 2024, a big shift towards AI-driven skills, ML skills, data, big drive towards that. Interestingly, I saw one this week, which was all about having AI prompt engineering skills, and that was for a product desk role, which I thought was really interesting. When I was just looking at the skill sets matrix of that team, I was like, that's really interesting, because they just understand that AI is becoming a critical part of the role. It's like when we first started entering the workforce, it was all about, can you use Excel and PowerPoint?
Technologies. Or application.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other one for me has been the companies that have advanced the most with technology from a digital maturity standpoint have been the ones that have partnered. They've brought in particular skill sets, but rather than go down the traditional kind of hiring routes, what they've done is leveraged organisations such as ourselves to say, here's the here's the use cases that we're sort of wanting to explore, or can you come in and help us find these, and therefore then augment talent or kind of around that specifically to do it. So yeah, that's definitely one that's rang true. And I think that actually has been one of the fundamental drivers that's moved things at pace over the last 12 months.
Yeah, I agree. The final one we had, mate, was an advantage for those who invest in a downturn. So in tougher times, businesses that are willing to innovate and invest in transformation could leap ahead while competitors stand still. Never waste a good crisis. That's what you said.
Yeah. Bit of a consulting term, but it's true. Never waste a good crisis.
Yeah. And essentially the principle that the slow market can offer the breathing space to overhaul processes and technology.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, I think we're still seeing that now. I don't necessarily think we saw it in 2024 for sure. We saw the hallmarks, the beginnings of it, especially in some areas in our market as big ones, and almost new battlegrounds being identified and becoming slightly more mature than they were at the beginning of the year. And I think with that, there is great opportunity for the consumer at the end of the day. There's big benefits that's going to be realised now at the back of this. It continues into 2025, which really nicely brings us on to the predictions, actually.
Yeah.
So I'll take that one. I think investing in the downturn and big changes in 2025 as those battlegrounds that we've seen become identified and become a little bit more defined in 2024 really take a hold in 2025 and some good movements.
A couple of things from me, I think, on that. As we're now in 2025, early January, the signs of economic instability. But we can see from our vantage point that in terms of at the moment, the investments going in, that's not stopping.
No.
So in this sector, which I think is good. For me, this year, we're going to see a huge focus on customer-centricity, user experience, customer at the heart of things. And what I mean is the actual purchaser / seller or remortgager. It's the actual consumer at the heart. And we've not seen that too much. The conversations, the strategy discussions and the strategy planning that we were doing in Q4 with clients, all focused in on around that. And that's been great. And I think we're going to see a real big push to that. And I think this leads to this strategic AI automation piece.
Yeah, and just quickly before we move on to that, on a macro piece that we were just covering, I think my final sort of prediction on the macroeconomic side of things is that I actually think we'll perhaps see a bit more of a focus from the government. Obviously, we had a change of government in 2024. Every single major party had big focuses on a lot of it around new housing because there's a housing shortage. The housing market actually offers economic opportunity for the government in power. And therefore, I think they'll start to look at that and think, actually, if we can speed up transactions and get cash moving through the economy in that fashion, then that'll be good for the macroeconomic growth of the country. And therefore, actually, there'll be an increased focus of a lot of the work that we're involved in.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, actually, I think that in the last episode of the live podcast, the 50th episode that we did, I thought that Alistair covered that off really well. And he articulated it excellently, because at the end of the day, if you speed up transactions, you improve liquidity in the market. And in a market that's a bit fragile, liquidity is really important. So we already can see with the data bill what's happening. And we think we from what we can tell, that's going to continue to be driven through. It's going to be really about the private sector pushing it, no question about it. But I think that pressures from government, I think that policymakers and people like that are now, this is kind of something that's going to happen. So for me, definitely consumer at the heart of many projects. The foundations are laid to drive HDI. I think horizontal digital integration for the uninitiated. We've been waxing lyrical about HDI for 12 months. what is HDI? Horizontal digital integration is what will enable interoperability. It's a framework. It's a model that essentially moves us from the vertical transformation that this market has had to the horizontal. It connects the ecosystem. Yeah. That's all HDI is. What you're going to see this year is you're going to see a rapid adoption of HDI strategies to understand exactly how organizations across this ecosystem can leverage distribution, gain access to more cases, speed up the transaction time, and thus significantly improve the consumer experience. Because when you improve the consumer experience, the commercial advantages to that are significant cross market. We're going to see a huge stride towards that. And I believe that that is going to change business models for certain, those tier 3 application providers. So if you're an application provider / vendor, and you sit at tier 3. Tier 3 is you layer your application into one vertical of the home buying and selling process. Your business model may, and I emphasize may, not directly this year, but I'd start to look at it and how you might want to start to look at your own HDI strategy, because you could potentially leverage distribution elsewhere to touch, more stuff. And that's a big one for me. And I think that then leads into the kind of strategic automation and AI piece. I think that's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, strategic AI and automations, 2025, we're going to see more coming to market.
Yeah.
Every organisation we're working with is talking about AI. Naturally, I think every organisation in the world is talking about AI. But everyone is beginning to test and use technology within their own organisation. At varying level, of course, but I think we'll see a suite of new AI-driven applications, vendors, even prop techs, I'd go as far to say, that are fully AI-driven.
Yeah, we can see it. We know there's some that are already in market.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily live with their applications, but we can see that they're coming.
And the other thing that I think we'll see is, to go back to that HDI point, more end-to-end automations. Now, again, without teaching anyone to suck eggs who might be listening, an automation is just automatically doing something using a machine. But end-to-end automation is quite a big step. Now, will we see that from house search through to completion? Perhaps not, but you might see end-to-end automations within a remortgage, which is then starts to become quite exciting. And I think foundations are in place and the frameworks are in place to facilitate that in 2025. And so I think we'll start to see a massive shift towards that.
Yeah, definitely. The other one where here we got is blockchain and secure transactions.
Yeah.
My view on that is security and transparency obviously remain vital. Governments, major platforms kind of earmarking resource to digitalise the land registry and property records and all of that kind of stuff. And we know that that's kind of been coming for a while. And there's obviously a vision there to try and get 70% of that or simple updates automatically registered by 2025. Yeah. So I think for me, we'll see advancements in this, but I don't think it will necessarily happen. I think there's a lot of advancements that are taking place. I think that there's a lot of work being done to try to do this stuff, but I think there's much lower hanging fruit elsewhere. Exactly. Yeah. And I think there's lower hanging fruit elsewhere. The argument against that is, but we've still got to continue to put in the infrastructure to potentially move towards this stuff. And for me, I agree with that. But I think this is where the network players, so I referred to this earlier about you've now got tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3 players in this market. The tier 1 providers are your network providers. They're the ones that are going to enable full end-to-end digital home buying and selling. You're going to have open loop players and you're going to have closed loop players. And I think what you're going to see is I think that the more agnostic players will actually then start to look at how they can advance this technology. Whether they'll start to put the bedrock in a bit now, I'm not sure. We know there's already existing sort of vendors in market. They've got levels of kind of blockchain and stuff, but the use cases for me aren't necessarily there that they're saying that are live. There's other areas of it, but I think, is it going to advance? Yes. Are you going to see something happen where you've got smart contract and blockchain enabled transaction this year? I don't think so.
No, I don't think we'll get all the way there. I agree with you. I think
good initiatives to help drive it. So it's not me being negative.
No, but I think
the reality, isn't it? That's not going to happen this year.
No, definitely not from an end-to-end level. But I think we'll see components of it mature significantly, which is from my vantage point, that's what I'm seeing. I think next end, I think it's going to.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
The component parts. I think the bit for me is my invitation to the broader market that if you're in a component area looking at this, get an HDI strategy.
100%.
Because that's what's going to accelerate it, because there's so much done there's still quite a lot that gets done in isolation. And it's a bit, people can romanticize about technology, and it's kind of like, you got to apply it to the real world.
Yeah. And I think the application, it has to be at a component level to start with.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a vision of the end to end, which will eventually come, right?
Yeah.
Cool. PropTech tools, virtual experiences. I think that'll be something that perhaps starts to take hold a little bit more in 2025. If we think back to 2023, in fact, our little exploration in the Middle East, and we went on there to see what was going on there. And I remember saying to you that it was actually on the plane. It was as we were boarding. I put my headphones on, and they were talking. They were speaking to Damar, I think it was, the property developer out there.
Damac, is it? Yeah.
Oh, Damac, that's it. Sorry, I got wrong. And they essentially allow people to buy property in Dubai now completely virtually. This is 2023. They do full virtual tours, allow everything to happen virtually. Now, it's a completely different marketplace. I'm not saying that we're going to get there in 2024, but I think we'll see the start of virtualization in different parts of the component journey start to take hold.
There's been a few people played with this, and we say, I won't mention any names, but I think that what the challenge with it is that this market, the UK market, is so complex.
That's huge complex.
That it'd be good if the actual transaction process was simplified and faster. I think virtualization will happen once the latter's been done first, i.e. the improvement of transaction time. What that then does is that actually boosts the property market to a point where you'll get overseas foreign investment, internal investment, where people are thinking, actually, I don't necessarily need to go and do this. Someone was saying to us, it was yesterday, and they were sort of explaining that one of their colleagues was over they've basically been working in London for a number of years, Canadian, and they were going back to Canada. They flew out on a Friday, found a house, transacted over the weekend, came back, job done. Now, obviously that wasn't a virtual experience, but then the conversation we were having said, actually, moving forward, if there was virtualization, that'll happen. So I think there'll be advancements in it, but again, like you said, almost compartmentalize. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think the first one's going to be around KYC and ID checks and stuff like that. It's happening already, right?
Yeah.
So in 2025, that'll become the norm, probably a bit strong, but it'll become commonplace, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then we'll just see other component areas just start to be chipped away at.
Yeah. I think the next big one for me is data.
Yeah.
And I think
I spend a life talking about data.
Yeah, well, look, I think, we've talked about the consumer element and that being a central focus. We've talked about HDI, that being a big driver. We've talked about AI, of course. That's always a big driver. Underpinning all of this is data and data standards. I think we're now at the precipice of this really kind of those foundational bits really starting to take. And if I think about, I know how busy you are, and and that your practice around AI, machine learning, but underpinning all of it is data and getting those kind of data structures, data lakes, whatever you call it, getting all of that in place.
Yeah.
But also the fact that with data standards and having commonality in data standards, this is going to be a big thing that's going to start to drive things. I think this year, as we saw towards the back end of last year, I think we're going to see more and more pilots, more and more tests of this sort of stuff driving not just component parts, but actually multi-layered parts of the process as this starts to become much more stitched together. And I think there's going to be a big focus on data integration and upfront information.
I was going to ask you about upfront information. Where's your head at on that really taking a proper hold in 2025?
Well, I think it's already. I mean, look, it's already there. Part A, B, C. Upfront information. It's there. What's been missing is that data standard. When you start to put the pieces together, things will start to accelerate. The pieces of the puzzle are kind of in place. As I said earlier in the conversation, the foundations are there now, and we can see it. My prediction will be that in 2025, that'll become more advanced. Data standards, data bill, more and more people beginning to realise, actually, let's start to use these standards, and that will become way more commonplace. That'll enable more collaboration. That'll start to drive this thing through even faster again. And I keep saying it, get a HDI strategy, because if you don't have one, you're going to get left behind in this. And you've got to understand what role you're going to play in it. Are you going to lay your applications onto a network? Are you going to become part of how are you going to do this? And you've got to kind of start thinking ahead like that. But this will be a critical part of it. And the upfront information element just drives it. And the upfront information providers that will come on that are popping up and doing that kind of stuff, they're going to need to be passing that layer all the way through. But this needs enabling, and it needs enabling at scale.
Yeah, and it starts to pass into the lending process as well, right?
Because, and they're interested in it because they can monetize.
Data-driven lending is...
Well, they've always been interested in interoperability, but they're more interested in it when they know how to monetize it.
100%.
Because interoperability equals predictability, and they can monetize predictability. That means they can offer a better service. Up until now, they've kind of been interested, but kind of been saying, well, lads...
It was linear, so linear. Whereas now it opens up a world of possibilities.
And that's what this stuff's doing. It's 2025, we'll see a big thing. And if you think about you think about our pipeline of work, where it's all based around HDI, it's all based around predictability. How do we get that interoperability piece, and what role are we going to play in that?
Yeah.
What tech are we building around it?
Great. Finally, I've got one which is it's fresh in my mind because I've been listening to CES all week. But sustainability, meeting tech, obviously ESG, environmental society. No. ESG, environmental, social, and governance is really coming to the fore when it comes to energy. I was going to say you had the fun and games around renting property and the energy ratings, etc. That there's a bit of a U-turn on that earlier in the year, but there's been lots of focus on it for a number of years. But I think in 2025 we're going to see this actually become something of a bit more material interest. And why is that relevant to the home buying mortgage process? Well, if somebody can't sell a house that's perhaps of a certain energy rating, then that's going to have quite a large impact when it comes to the conveyancing process. And if you don't find that out, so let down the search or whatever, we're going to start mapping that in.
Yeah.
Equally, and this is where it really gets interesting with what's been going on at CES over in Vegas this week, is there's a big move towards the connected home there. And that's what everyone's starting to talk about. And I don't think the connected home is necessarily going to take full hold in 2025, but we start to see that direction of travel. That'll start to play into everything when it comes to, okay, well, how do we value a house? Because in the same way, a boiler that is of a certain age has an impact on the value of the house and everything else, and the obviously efficiency of the house has an impact. We'll start to see the connected home also start to have an impact.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing a massive move just from housings with solar panels, heat pumps, even battery packs to charge electric cars and things like that. We'll start to see that impact the home buying and mortgage process by proxy. And that's what I think will start to take over in 2025. I don't think we'll see huge changes, but it'll start to be on people's radar.
Yeah, I can see that. I think the question is that, when we look at our target audience and this market, what's the impact?
Yeah.
What's the impact to a lender? For me, it's kind of like keep an eye on it. It's opportunity.
Yeah, it's watching my brief, right?
It's a bit, it's definitely a watching brief. But I think the good thing about watching briefs is, and people kind of misunderstand this sometimes when we use the phrase, it's a watching brief. A watching brief is there to help inform your product strategy. How are you going to kind of advance your products around this stuff? And is it relevant?
Well, yeah, and look, we already starting to see green lending be a thing outside. Well, as green mortgage, I'm not 100% sure, but outside of the mortgage space, you start to see green lending become more of a commonplace thing, and actually that'll start to inform. You start to see what's going on, and that is where the watching brief comes in. Right? It's like, well, have a look, see how it might impact it. And actually, when it comes to lending on properties, you might start to see different products come to the market that perhaps slightly more green focus for more efficient houses, etc.
Yeah. So that concludes this New Year episode of the Digital Disruption Podcast, brought to you by Novus Strategy and Consulting with Pete Gamby and myself, Chris Williams. Thanks very much for tuning in. Of course, at the end of this year or early next year, we'll be looking at the predictions that we made. But for now, a happy new year from us here at Novus. We hope it's prosperous and generous to you. As ever, if there's anything in the conversation that we've had today that you're interested in, would like to find out more about, don't hesitate to get in touch via the usual channels. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. See you again.
Thanks a lot.